creating. Now, there are some folks that kind of come to this discussion, since these laws really deal with multi-stall or multi-person single-sex restrooms, right? We're talking about multi-stall restrooms, multi-stall locker rooms, not single-stall, although it does occasionally apply to that too, depending on which law you're looking at. But a lot of folks come to the conversation and basically said, why can't we just give trans people their own bathroom and be done with it? Just no. Let's ignore for a moment the enormous cost of building separate bathrooms for just trans people to use and focus on the segregation of that idea. Those bathrooms would single people out, outing them as trans and putting them in as much danger. There is a reason why the primary ruling in Brown versus Board of Education was that separate but equal is inherently unequal. Know your history, folks, or be doomed to repeat it. I've also had people say to me, I just don't see the big deal. Just use the bathroom for the junk you have. Go through the surgery and change your birth certificate. Genitalia does not determine gender or sex. Just as women have lost breasts to breast cancer or other medical conditions, there are more men than one might imagine that have lost their penises to war, accidents, or medical conditions. They are no less men and are not expected to start using a different restroom, just as women without breasts are no less women. Okay? If you look at the scientific side of it, chromosomes, hormones, and plenty of other factors are credited in determining quote-unquote biological sex, none of which determine gender. If all we look at is anatomy, then where does that leave intersex folks? There are several different variations of genitalia or chromosomes that make up the category of intersex. These are folks that were born with anatomy or genetics that differ from the socially expected presentation of male or female bodies, and one of the most common forms, Klinefelter syndrome, or having XXY chromosomes, occurs in roughly 1 in every 1,000 births. Where does that leave genderqueer people? Or people who otherwise do not identify within the gender binary, right? This isn't just about folks that identify as trans. This affects a lot of different people. It affects trans folks that identify on the binary. It affects trans folks that do not identify on the binary. It affects masculine-presenting women. It affects feminine-presenting men. It affects intersex people. There are a lot of people that these laws affect. There are also plenty of trans people that don't have surgery for a multitude of reasons, right? There's cost, there's how they identify, there's medical inability, there's fear. And quite honestly, whether someone has a particular surgery to treat a medical condition is legally none of your business. There are tons of laws that protect a person's private medical history. But as soon as someone identifies as trans, society at large believes they suddenly have some right to that information. They don't. You don't. But let's say that you fall into the category of a trans person that both wants and is able to have surgery in order to change your birth certificate. There are no guarantees that you can even do that. Each state sets its own requirements as to who, how, and when you can change your birth certificate. Some states allow you to change your birth certificate while just on hormones. Some allow you to change it with just top surgery and no bottom surgery. Some states do not allow you to change your birth certificate under any circumstances. And the state that gets to choose that is the state a person is born in, not the state they live in. An individual can't change where they were born, no matter where they currently live. They still have to go through their birth state for a certificate change. Currently, there are at least 4 states that do not allow a change to the sex on a birth certificate, regardless of the extent of transition, regardless of surgery. Now look, that's a lot of what folks have asked me. These are the things we're concerned about. What do you have to say about this? Or these are the arguments that they bring to me. Like this, and this is the arguments that they bring to a lot of trans people. But you know what? Outside of the points and counterpoints and all of that, here's the reality. The reality, these laws affect trans people regardless of their birth certificate. Regardless of how a trans person looks, if someone is made uncomfortable by their presence, The burden is on them to prove that they have a legal right to be there. And I don't know a single person that carries their birth certificate with them, regardless of the gender marker that it holds. The reality is that these laws actually do the opposite of their intended claim. These laws don't protect anyone. In fact, they put more trans people at risk of assault and discrimination. As for the cis people that are trying to claim protection, it's an illusion. They don't address a single issue that it proposes to fix. These laws actually put men in women's rooms and women in men's rooms. There are thousands of trans people that are read as their correct gender each and every day, but for one reason or another do not have a corrected birth certificate. By law, they must use the wrong restroom and locker room, even if they've already had all the surgeries you claim are necessary, and this includes transgender children. There are a lot of trans folks that, if they were to follow the law, would likely be arrested because most folks would see them as in the wrong bathroom. These laws don't solve any problems. They just create new ones. The reality is that these laws have led to gender policing and some transphobic people pushing their way into women's bathrooms and frightening people. A man in Frisco, Texas, just a few days ago, followed a woman into the bathroom just this weekend because he said she was, quote, dressed like a man. This woman does not identify as trans and was just wearing a t-shirt and basketball shorts. And then the director of the American Family Association admitted to sending men into women's bathrooms. They admitted to sending people who do not identify as trans, who identify as cis men, into women's bathrooms. So let me get this straight. You don't want men in women's bathrooms. And since that isn't really happening, you're going to send men into women's bathrooms and claim that there's a problem? You are the problem. The reality, everyone has been using bathrooms with trans people their entire lives, and everyone is just fine. In fact, the majority of people don't even realize it. The reality is that these laws are just another example of enshrining transphobia under the guise of protection. The same protection argument has been used time and time again against whoever the enemy of the day was or is. During the 100 years of Jim Crow laws that legalized segregation, the threat was said to be black citizens. According to Donald Trump, it's immigrants from Mexico. And according to proponents of these laws, it's the trans population. Claim the noble yet false goal of, quote, protecting our women and children, and in the process, strip minority groups of their basic civil liberties. As so many people have already stated, it wasn't about water fountains then, and it isn't about bathrooms now. This is not about that. This is about ignorance, fear, and hate, because when you break down every argument in favor of these discriminatory wastes of resources, they are baseless. For those trans folks that are affected by these laws, I want you to know about a couple of resources that I've found that you can check out and pass along. Now, obviously, there are plenty, but these are two that I have found that I thought folks should really know about. The first is the Sylvia Rivera Law Project has a documentary video called Toilet Training. And you can find more info at srlp.org/resources/toilet training. And the second is you can download the Refuge Restrooms iOS app. It's a free app that maps safe restrooms for trans, intersex, and gender nonconforming folks. And it also shows whether the restroom is wheelchair accessible. If you don't see a safe restroom that you know is there, you can add that on the app as well. Now, if you don't have an iOS device, if you have Android or a flip phone, or don't have access to a cell phone or smartphone, you can still access all of this information at refugerestrooms.org. If you have had a bathroom experience or another story that you'd like to share, I want to hear from you. I am always looking for new submissions for the Strong Stance stories. And if you'd like to submit a story or just want more information, shoot me an email at thestrongstance@gmail.com. So that's about all I have for this episode. I want to thank our listeners, as always, for tuning in. Special thanks to the executive producer of the Back to Us Radio Network, the amazing Anise Mabry. Now, I have to go unpack because I just got back from, you guessed it, North Carolina. Be safe, everyone, and I'll see you next time. My name is Eli Strong, and this has been The Strong Stance.